Hey guys, my name is Thibault Scraggs, and today I'll be presenting to you an overview of the consumer electronics industry in special relation to the logistical network that make up Sony's supply chain. The consumer electronics industry is one of the most dynamic, with products undergoing rapid change, leading to endless innovations and new product offerings. There is a persistent demand from the consumers, with consumer electronics changing the way people interact with and consume content. The increase in demand globally and the pressure between competitors has resulted in a need for a well-developed and structured supply chain management strategy. Sony has a supply chain that stretches across the entire globe. As of March 2020, the company owns electronic manufacturing facilities in Thailand, Malaysia, UK, Brazil, South Korea, and Japan. The below diagram sets out the typical supply chain for Sony. As shown by the diagram, the supply chain of Sony commences with the mining and procuring of raw materials. For this stage, because Sony heavily relies upon outside suppliers, Sony evaluates and ensures that these suppliers are compliant with the Sony supply chain of code of conduct to ensure ethical standards are in place. This is to ensure practices such as child labour and health and safety policies are in place. This then flows on to the procurement of raw materials and parts. As an example, a camera requires hundreds of different components, from tiny little screws, capacitors, to circuit boards, lenses, and batteries. One specific example of this supply chain and use can be illustrated with the lithium battery that Sony uses in their cameras. Cobalt is an integral mineral that makes up a lithium battery, in which it is mined generally in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is then shipped to Murata Manufacturing in Japan to be turned into a lithium battery. At this stage of the supply chain, Sony still heavily relies upon external suppliers for the procurement of these parts. A few other examples of this include Zeiss for the manufacturing of Sony lenses, and various manufacturers such as Samsung and Micron Technology for the chips they use in these cameras, just to name a few examples. The next stage of the supply chain is the physical distribution stage, where the individual components are shipped and distributed to the Sony manufacturing plants for assembly. As an example, again, Sony cameras are generally manufactured in either Japan or Taiwan, depending on what model they are. It is to be noted, however, that Sony is reducing the environmental impact of logistics by promoting model shift and utilizing joint delivery and milk runs. In the case of a milk run, a truck will follow a route whereby they collect from several suppliers rather than using separate routes to each supplier. The next stage of the chain, as then can be seen in the diagram, is that the inventory of the finished products is undertaken and distribution is carried out to the warehouses and wholesalers. Lastly, the finished products are distributed to the local retailers, leading to the purchase by consumers. As part of Sony's commitment to corporate social responsibility and reducing CO2 emissions, a model shift approach is typically implemented for the distribution of finished products. Model shift is a switching of logistical transport modes from sea to air and from truck to rail to reduce carbon emissions. Examples of this include the use of rail instead of truck in Japan to transport large-sized products such as LCD OLED TVs, and in the United States, Sony has optimized the use of rail transport and moving freight between the West and East Coast to reduce weight loading and CO2 emissions. It is to be noted, one of the major challenges facing the consumer electronics industry is demand variability. Demand variability generally increases as one moves up a supply chain, as the demand for finished products is typically less variable than for sub-assemblies, which is then less variable for individual components. This phenomenon is commonly referred to as the bullwhip effect. In this diagram, it can be shown that the customer demand for consumer electronics directly affects the company's inventory. When companies attempt to forecast the demand for consumer electronics through the supply chain, from consumer demand to raw material suppliers, can lead to amplification or variations. This then leads to issues with time, cost, and inventory and supply chain management. A very recent example of this can be seen with the PS5, which has become one of the most in-demand but hardest to attain consumer products on the market by Sony. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a greater demand for electronics than forecast due to the drive for in-home entertainment incited by government lockdowns in many countries. The other major issue also stems from supply issues, where there are major chip shortages for the console due to these plants that manufacture the chip having to close its stores for quite a significant amount of time due to the pandemic as well. Because there is only a handful of chip manufacturers globally, has resulted in a shortage of these chips that are an integral part of many consumer electronics. Secondly is the challenge with the ongoing and continuous advancements in technology innovations. Shortened product life cycles is leading to the challenges of demand planning, price, and profit erosion. To tackle and address this issue, consumer electronics companies such as Sony have implemented systems and tools of dedicated inventory management to monitor inventory and transaction information. Consumer desires to replace products such as their flat-screen TVs with new models with better picture has also increased wasteful consumption. Electronical and electrical waste, or also commonly referred to as e-waste, is an ever-increasing challenge for the consumer electronics industry, with 50 million tons of e-waste each year and only 20% being formally recycled. E-waste represents not only an environmental danger but also a lost opportunity for suppliers and fulfillment centres, with the value of material estimated at AUD $82 million per year. To combat this, Sony has implemented recycling programs and complied with recycling laws and regulations in countries and regions across the globe. Sony has also implemented initiatives such as the Sony Green Management 2025, with the ultimate quest being a name for zero environmental footprint. Finally, challenges are still faced and felt with the ongoing pandemic. Sony has reported that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted their supply chain, with governments mandating closure of their manufacturing plants in early 2020 in China, Malaysia, and Wales. In addition, the lockdowns and closures of retailers around the world continues to impact sales. Other impacts to the company include movement restrictions across national borders, providing Sony with the challenge of getting its engineers to manufacturing hubs to help with new product launches or giving manufacturing instructions. Thank you for listening.